Did he just say family? Claire discovers Holden and Matt's hidden bond. The morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains of the Newman Ranch guest room, casting slanted lines across the polished hardwood bottom. But Claire's attention was fixed not on the light or the quiet serenity of the space, but on the way Holden stood, tense, near the edge of the bed, his hands gripping the reverse of a president as though it were a lifeline, while Matt paced sluggishly in front of him, eyes dark and cautious, the weight of implied history pressing down between them. Claire had come to the estate awaiting maybe a routine discussion, perhaps indeed a small piece of gossip about the rearmost Newman-Abbott feud, but what she walked into felt like a secret chamber of some ancient, interdicted knowledge, the kind of disclosure that made her stomach strain and her palpitation shaft. She had been carrying coffee for both of them, the broom entwining overhead in the morning light, but the moment she set the mugs on the small oak table near the window, she tasted the charged energy that crepitated in the air, a pressure so palpable that it made her throat dry and her fritters chink. "Hold on," she rumored, not entirely sure if she meant to break the moment or simply anchor herself in reality, and both men's heads snapped toward her, eyes sharp with that rare admixture of guard and guilt. Matt's jaw gripped, and Holden's hands relaxed just enough to betray the trouble it took not to reach for commodity, anything, to maintain control over the discussion. The room smelled noiselessly of cologne and old leather, the kind of mannish aroma that dallied like a memory, and Claire's mind contended, trying to catch pieces of their dialogue like shards of a broken glass. Holden's voice, low and measured, was the first to speak again, threading through the pressure like a cutter. "Claire, it's not what it looks like." He avoided Matt's aspect, eyes fluttering toward the bottom, also back over at her with a nearly inappreciable earthquake that made her casket strain. "Not what it looks like?" she echoed, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of confusion inside her. "Because, Holden, it looks like you two know each other in ways you're not telling me. And I'm not just talking about work." Matt, pacing, eventually stopped and turned toward her, and in that moment, the air sounded to shift, the unnoticeable walls of secretiveness hanging to crack. His eyes were dark pools of emotion, not just wrathfulness or guard, but commodity far deeper, commodity domestic, commodity Claire hadn't anticipated. "Claire," he said precisely, nearly appreciatively, "you weren't supposed to hear that." His hand rose slightly, as if to shield off the question she hadn't indeed completely formed yet. Claire's heart swiped. She had the sense, a eating certainty, that she was on the cliff of discovering commodity monumental. She gobbled sluggishly, trying to undergird herself against the tidal surge of suspicion that roared in her mind. "Hear what?" she asked, her voice soft but unyielding, the calm before the storm. The room fell into silence, the kind that made every crack of the timepiece feel like a blast. Holden shifted again, eventually meeting her aspect. The weight of his secrets pressing on him visibly, like unnoticeable chains he was hopeless to loosen. "Matt and I," he began, his voice pulsing slightly, "we're further connected than anyone knows." Claire sat, the mug of coffee half raised to her lips, and the words landed like monuments in her casket. "Connected," she repeated, disbelief and dread threading through her tone. Matt stepped closer, and the lines around his eyes softened for the first time, a flicker of vulnerability slipping past the hardened surface he showed the world. "Yes," he said simply, the word heavy with implied times, "Holden is my family." The air sounded to shatter, the room wobbling with the weight of the disclosure. Claire felt her knees weaken slightly, and she set the mug down with a pulsing hand, the warmth of the ceramic grounding her against the shock. Her mind reeled. Family? Holden and Matt? The people she allowed. She knew so well were hiding a bond that would change everything she allowed. She understood about them, about their provocations, about every comma she'd ever witnessed. Family, she rumored again, slightly above a breath, as if speaking it audibly could make the verity dissipate. But it didn't. Matt jounced, his eyes glistering slightly. Not with gashes, but with the raw intensity of honesty eventually admitted, a secret no longer confined to murk. Holden exhaled sprucely, the pressure in his shoulders easing slightly, though the vulnerability dallied in the set of his jaw and the flicker in his eyes. "Claire," Holden said, his tone praying yet steady, "you have to understand this isn't easy. It hasn't been easy for either of us. Our lives, they've been complicated, messy, but this bond, it's always been there, indeed where no bone differently saw it. Claire stepped closer, her spontaneous empathy battling with her unbelief, her mind trying to thread the pieces together, the subtle familiarity in their gestures toward each other, the defensive stripes that sounded arbitrary but were now coherent, the nearly inappreciable ganders that held further than words could convey. She could feel the palpitation of their participated history wobbling in the space between them, a shade woven from innumerous stories, rumored secrets, and long-suppressed feelings. "Why didn't anyone ever tell me?" she asked eventually, a hint of blameworthiness threading through the anguish in her voice, though she softened incontinently at the raw openness in Holden's eyes. Matt's hand brushed against the reverse of the president near him, a nervous tick Claire suddenly honored as a gesture of grounding, of trying to hold oneself steady against the storm of disclosure. "We didn't know how," Matt admitted still, his voice carrying the weight of remorse and verity intertwined. "The timing, it was no way right. And some effects are complicated, Claire. Families are complicated." Claire jounced, sluggishly, letting the words sink by, her mind fluttering through all the moments that suddenly gained new meaning, the subtle alliances, the unexplained absences, the moments of inexplainable understanding between the two men. She began, also broke, the enormity of the discovery anchoring her words in admiration rather than immediate response. Holden stepped closer, his presence commanding yet gentle, bridging the space that the secret had widened between them. "Claire, we trust you," he said vocally. "But we need you to understand that what you've just learned, it changes nothing about who we're to you. It's just part of the story we know we got to tell." Claire's casket tensed with emotion, a mix of compassion, shock, and a forming sense of responsibility settling over her. She could feel the enormity of what this meant, not just for Holden and Matt, but for everyone tied to them, every web of connections that would ripple outward. Formally, this verity came given. I get it," she said, though the words felt shy against the storm of understanding sweeping through her. Matt's aspect softened, and he reached out a hand that floated just shy of hers, a silent immolation of trust. Holden imaged the gesture, a subtle harmony that spoke volumes about the bond they participated and the faith they were placing in her. Claire swallowed hard, the moment stretching, suspended in the golden morning light, a tableau of implied love, fidelity, and disclosure. And in that moment, she realized that life in Genoa City would no way be the same, not for her, not for Holden and Matt, and clearly not for anyone who would come to know the verity of the retired Brotherhood she had just uncovered. The air sounded to coo with possibility, peril, and the kind of raw, emotional honesty that could either heal or shatter every connection she had ever reckoned upon. And Claire, standing between them, the weight of knowledge settling heavily in her casket, knew with absolute certainty that everything had changed, and that the story was only just beginning. Claire stood frozen, the disclosure of Holden and Matt being sisters echoing through her mind like a grim shower. She could still see the subtle gestures that now made sense, the way Holden's aspect dallied protectively on Matt, the nearly inappreciable way Matt acclimated his posture whenever Holden was near, the quiet coincidence in their movements that she had always chalked up to coexistence. Now, it all clicked, and her casket tensed as if the verity itself was a physical weight. Holden stepped forward cautiously, his eyes soft but cautious. "Claire, I need you to understand," he began, his voice a low hum of urgency. "This bond, it's complicated. We weren't ready to partake it ahead. There were reasons, dangerous reasons. Effects that could have hurt people we watch about." His hands coiled slightly, his fritters brushing against the edge of the president as if drawing strength from it. Matt, still pacing, broke mid-step, his aspect drifting toward the window where the morning sun painted stripes across the hardwood bottom. "We've been trying to keep our lives separate, Claire," he said still, nearly to himself. "For your safety, for everyone's safety, some secrets aren't meant to be exposed until the timing is right." His jaw tensed. "But supposedly, timing doesn't watch what's right or wrong." Claire swallowed hard, trying to reuse the alluvion of information. "You mean all this time, the way you've been acting, defensive, uncommunicative, it was because you're sisters?" she asked, her voice pulsing slightly. Her hands gripped at her sides, fighting the appetite to reach out to both of them, to ground the unnoticeable ocean that times of secretiveness had erected. "Yes," Holden admitted, his tone flat but filled with emotion. From the moment we realized the verity, our lives changed. We had to navigate it still, precisely, because Matt's life has been on the line further than formerly. He broke, his eyes darkening with the weight of recollections. And mine, too. You don't understand how dangerous some of the people in Genoa City can be. Claire's mind reeled. Genoa City had always been a grease paint cask of secrets and backstabbings, but this was different. This was particular. It was blood deep, unbreakable, and hidden in plain sight. So all those times I allowed. You two were just business rivals or playing games, it was really about guarding each other. She rumored. Matt eventually stopped pacing and turned completely to her, his expression softening. Exactly. Every time we disaccorded, every time it sounded like we were at odds, it was us testing boundaries, making sure we could survive together without dragging anyone differently into the chaos. And, Claire, that includes you. Claire felt a lump in her throat. The layers of treason and trust, secretiveness and protection, intertwined into a dizzying knot in her mind. She had always considered herself observant, suitable to read the craft in people's expressions, the transitory gestures that told further than words ever could. But indeed she hadn't seen this coming. Not from either of them. I don't know what to say, she admitted, eventually letting herself spare against the reverse of the president she had placed the coffee on. This changes everything. Holden took a slow step closer, his voice establishment but gentle. It changes nothing about us as people, Claire. It changes how you understand us. That's all. Matt jounced, crossing his arms. We trust you, Claire. That's why we're telling you now. But you have to promise that this stays between us until we can decide what to do next. Some people, some veritably dangerous people, would exploit this if they knew. Claire's palpitation quickened. The warning in his voice was empty. It carried the weight of history, of retired battles she had indeed been apprehensive of. I promise, she said forcefully, though outside, she was screaming with the adrenaline of the secret she now carried. The room fell into a tense silence, broken only by the faint hum of the megacity outdoors. Claire's eyes darted between the two men, her mind racing to piece together the counter-accusations. Matt and Holden, sisters, hidden from everyone. And now, with her knowledge, the stakes had risen exponentially. You need to tell me everything, she said eventually, her voice soft but pertinacious. I need to understand how this started, why it was hidden, and everything in between. Because I ain't just walked down from this, not now. Holden exhaled sluggishly, his hands flexing at his sides. It started long before either of us were completely apprehensive, he began. Our parents, our family, there were effects left unsaid, promises broken. And when we set up each other, when we eventually realized we participated further than just blood, it was inviting, dangerous. And we weren't ready for the consequences. Matt's aspect hardened slightly. We've both lived with falsehoods, Claire. Lies to cover people, lies to survive. And yes, hiding the verity from you was part of that. But now, the world has shifted. Effects are different. People are changing. And the secrets we've held, they're going to count further than ever. Claire felt a bite run down her chine. You mean adversaries? She asked cautiously. Matt's lips pressed into a thin line. Adversaries are far and wide in Genoa City, he said still. But now those who would use our bond against us will stop at nothing. And we ain't let that be. The three of them stood in silence, the morning sun catching the edges of the room in golden light, casting long murk that sounded nearly alive, stretching and shifting like the secrets that had just been revealed. Claire's mind contended as she considered the coming way. This disclosure wasn't just a particular shock, it had ramifications for everyone in the megacity, for every deal, every alliance, every relationship that had been erected on hypotheticals she now knew were false. Okay, she said eventually, her voice steady despite the storm of feelings inside her. We deal with this together. We figure out what this means. But no further secrets. Not presently. Holden jounced, a flicker of relief in his eyes. No further secrets, he agreed. Matt's expression softened, and for the first time, a small, nearly inappreciable smile touched his lips. Also, let's launch by planning our coming move precisely. The people who would exploit this, they'll come. And we've to be ready. Claire's heart pounded, not with fear, but with a sense of purpose. She had been brought into a storm she hadn't anticipated, but she wouldn't back down. Not from Holden. Not from Matt. And clearly not from the involved web of peril and fidelity that now defined their lives. As they began to speak in hushed tones, mapping out strategies and contingencies, Claire realized commodity profound. Knowledge was power, but in Genoa City, it was also dangerous. And knowing the verity about Holden and Matt, knowing they were sisters, had just made her life infinitely more complicated. And yet there was a strange clarity in that chaos. For the first time, she saw the depth of fidelity, the unbreakable bond that ran beneath the face of every commerce she had witnessed. And in that disclosure, there was a sense of admiration, of wonder, and a forming understanding that occasionally, the hardest trueness were the bones that shaped fates. Claire could feel her knees shaking slightly as she sank into the president, letting the weight of what she had just learned settle over her like a suffocating mask. Holden and Matt's disclosure wasn't just shocking, it was seismic. Every comma she had witnessed over the once months, every precisely paused discussion, every subtle regard and guarded word now had a new, sharper meaning. She flashed back the pressure in the Newman boardroom last week when Matt had walked in, the inexplainable flicker in Holden's eyes that she had chalked up to contest or stress, and suddenly it all clicked. It wasn't contest at all. It had been association, hidden under layers of survival, strategy, and secretiveness. Her hands gripped the arms of the president, and she exhaled sluggishly, trying to undergird herself. I need to understand everything, she said eventually, her voice slightly above a tail, though it carried the weight of command. How did you two keep this hidden? Why now? Why me? Holden's shoulders drooped slightly as he sank into the armchair across from her. It wasn't easy, he admitted. Matt and we've always had to be careful. People in Genoa City don't forgive sins fluently. And a bond like ours, blood ties, it's dangerous. You don't know how people will reply when they see it as influence. Matt, leaning against the window frame, folded his arms across his casket. His eyes flicked briefly to Claire, also back toward the megacity beyond the glass. Our lives have been full of manipulation and hidden dockets, he said still. You've seen it yourself, Claire. You know the games, the schemes, the backstabbings. But this is different. This is particular. Claire's mind contended. She could feel the pieces of a mystification falling into place, indeed as the edges still sounded jagged and deficient. I get that, she said, her voice gaining strength. But hiding this from me, that feels like a treason too. I'm not just a observer, Holden. I see effects, I hear effects, I connect blotches. And now, I'm holding a piece of the story that could change everything. Holden's eyes softened. Claire, we trust you. That's why we're telling you. But you have to promise, this doesn't leave this room until we're ready to control the narrative. There are people who would use this knowledge against us, against you. Claire jounced, the graveness of the situation sinking in. I understand. I promise. But I need environment. I need the story, every detail. I need to know why this is passing now, and what it means for all of us. Matt eventually moved closer, his expression open but guarded, a admixture of vulnerability and computation. It started long before either of us were completely apprehensive, he said, his voice nearly a murmur. We were separated at a youthful age. Family secrets, lies told to cover, or perhaps to hide sins. It doesn't matter now. The point is, we only lately discovered the verity. And formally we did. We realized how deeply it tied us together and how dangerous it could be if anyone differently set up out. Claire leaned forward, the urgency in her own heart imaged in her eyes. So, when did you realize? How long have you known? Holden changed a regard with Matt, a silent understanding passing between them. About 6 months ago, Holden admitted. We were both probing a lead about some fiscal disagreement at Newman Enterprises, and certain records led to questions. And questions led to answers, and answers led to this. He signaled vaguely between them. And we've had to navigate it still, Matt continued. We've been careful, designedly separate in public, conservative in private, so that no bone. Not our families, Not our adversaries could exploit what we now know. But the situation has changed. People are starting to notice, to push, to dig. That's why we had to tell you, Claire. Claire sat back, absorbing the weight of their words. She could feel the pressure in the room. The energy curled tight like a spring ready to snap. And yet, beneath